have a dear friend in New York City. She lives in New Jersey, who I sat with last summer after she had spent $3,000 trying to duplicate what she said she could get for $20 with a marriage license. She and her partner, protections. I have friends here in Erie, 2 in this room, who lost partners, became involved in legal entanglements, that had they had the $20 piece of paper, would never have happened. It's an uphill battle. One, the perception of the community, how the community is seen. We are demonized, we are abominized. I mean, they're not talking about us eating scallops. We are marginalized, particularly as women. And I can speak to this with some knowledge because 3 years ago, I was straight and I was male. Ooh, surprise, sorry about that. And the second I wasn't, I was suddenly a third-class citizen. I was appalled. I was marginalized in my own field. Drug reps brought me shiny pens instead of sending research VPs. And I realized that suddenly that marriage, which I had taken for granted, I'd been married, I could not get married again. I have a household. I cannot pass on the property without very complicated legal mechanism. I cannot be heard that easily any longer. I'm a pervert, I'm twisted, and all kinds of things. I made abominations before the Lord before I set foot out of bed. Then I spend the next few minutes before breakfast trying to make it an even 10. We face a huge uphill battle. We shouldn't. This is not a new phenomenon. The world has known of lesbian couples through recorded history. The world has known of strong women. The president of Bryn Mawr College at the turn of the century was placed in a position by her lover who was chairman of the board. They lived together in a house on campus. Don't suppose everyone knew? We have been weak because we have been invisible. We have had no impact because we have had no voice, and the time has come for that to stop. Too many among us fear losing our positions, repercussions on our children, negative outcomes in custody matters if they are out. I had a friend who said, you know, such and such would have been good on this panel, but they won't come out. Or she would have been good on this panel, but she cannot be that out. But because of what I've done, I'm out. There's no way to avoid my past. There's no way to avoid who I am. So tonight I speak for them, for those who have lost spouses and lost property, and did not simply have the mourning to deal with, but had to deal with a legal nightmare, the incredible insecurity of watching their entire world fall apart. Those who had to go to extraordinary lengths to protect themselves. Those who still feel they cannot walk down the street holding hands. And for them I speak tonight. Thank you.
I was telling Reverend Steve that I would count my evening here as a complete success if we could get folks to simply realize, and most people may already know this, that a civil union is not another term for marriage, just not just a repackaged thing. There are important legal differences that obtain. For example, civil unions are not transportable. So if you have a civil union in another state, it does. If the only 2 states allow that, it doesn't count for anything here. There are numerous benefits that can't be reproduced, even if you have like the best lawyer in the world. For example, there was a thing a while ago where, for example, married couples can't be forced to testify against each other. When Rosie O'Donnell and the magazine that had published it, the people who were in the magazine that had her name on it for a while, were having a civil court case, her partner Kelly was if they'd been legally married, would not have had to testify against her, and she had to testify because they were not married. So just when people say that, well, actually a majority of gay folks think that they're the same thing, that's inaccurate. One of the arguments also that goes against the thing is that somehow this will change marriage, and marriage will be never this, never be the same thing again, which of course is kind of a front because marriage has changed over the years. It's also one of the curious things, true story. Picture it, Erie, 1996. A lot of people claim that we're going to be changed by this, or this is going to be just totally rewriting laws. A friend of mine was talking about this. Is during when Ellen was coming out. And the person's mother, who was not aware that he was gay, was, well, I am so angry with Oprah that she went on that, the special where Ellen came out, that she had Ellen on her show, and I'm so angry at Oprah for supporting the homosexual lifestyle that I'm not going to watch Oprah in the afternoons anymore. From now on, I'm going to watch Rosie. So, I mean, the logic behind, the point that I'm trying to make is that there are people who claim that somehow they're going to be changed by this, and they can't even tell who this population is. So, the point is, if your gaydar is that defective, look, you're not going to pick up on it anyways. If you're going, if you're still wondering about, look, I wonder if Liberace was, then just forget, But some of the other things too that people are not aware about, like some of the weird ramifications that we've created, for example, by the federal government will not recognize, that it's possible for gay marriage or marriage between same-sex couples not be recognized at the federal level. There's also a really weird thing that hasn't been brought out that. States will be allowed not to recognize marriages from, same-sex marriages from currently only Massachusetts, which, by the way, lowest incidence of divorce in the country, Massachusetts. So let's all remember that. But anyways, one of the ramifications of that is that historically it's always been the case that if you get married in one state, then you're married everywhere, even if you couldn't have gotten married under the laws of that state, which makes a lot of sense. One of the ramifications of that folks have not thought about is that actually the so-called Defense of Marriage Act, where you don't have to recognize out-of-state same-sex marriages, means that if you work your cards right, it actually opens the back door to bigamy. Why? You're a couple in Massachusetts, you get married. You move to another state which doesn't recognize it. Well, gee, people who are not married are perfectly free to enter into a legally valid marriage. Which means that if you marry somebody of the opposite gender in the state that does not respect the Massachusetts marriage, well, who's your spouse? I don't know, where are you at? So I mean that there's a number of things that people haven't really done the math yet on. And again, like I said, there's sort of this argument that somehow it will irreparably harm our nation. That's inaccurate. There was a lot of statements. For example, there's some very moving things on Advocate.com when there were the marriages in San Francisco, and one of the editors for the Advocate was there marrying his partners. Beautifully moving. And there was a couple there that was protesting. How dare you do this? This is offensive. But the thing that was kind of the kicker to that was that it was an interracial couple, and the irony may not be lost on you, but 40 years ago, 30, in some parts of the country, this was you, and the same thing was that, this somehow threatens the stability of marriage, and ultimately it's all about, how we support each other and that kind of a thing. So I guess that's it. Next. Yeah. I was taking my time.
Yes, thank you. We use the term equal marriage in order to stress that the right of same-sex couples to legally marry is about affording equal rights under the law to all citizens. The state of Massachusetts sent shockwaves across the land when its Supreme Court found that preventing same-sex couples from marrying violated that state's constitution. For the past 3 years, same-sex couples in Massachusetts have therefore been able to obtain marriage licenses and be legally wed. And lo and behold, Massachusetts is still standing. No bolt of lightning has been hurled from heaven to destroy it. But the reaction from human opponents has been swift and vicious. To date, 27 states have enacted bans against same-sex marriage. Here in Pennsylvania, there was a huge effort recently to pass an amendment to our state constitution that would prohibit such marriages. Fortunately, it failed.